The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's a Friday, the end of another active week in Fall River.
Another headache.
And more headaches and more, the winds shift here more than they do in Antarctica.
I know, it's craziness. Well, let's get right out of the barrel here. Governor Charlie Baker lets Braintree Chief keep his job while collecting his $116,000 pension. Now, I always thought that you had a 2-year limit and you could only work 120 days, et cetera, but I guess if you're connected...
Well, when you connect, there you go. It just goes to show, we should have had our screw you taxpayer prompted, ready to go, because, again, the politicians have proven when it's taking care of themselves or somebody they know that no law will stand in the way. There is no justice, no moral code, no obligation to the taxpayer. Nothing stands in the way of patronage. Now, I mean,
Screw you, taxpayer!
Yeah, and double. Now this guy is getting $116,000. And now he's going to work and get paid $154,000. So do the math. Do the math. So that's let's see. I'm doing it quickly in my head. That's
$280,000.
$270,000. $270,000 a year. $250,000
on the taxpayer back.
$250,000. I don't even know if the general of the armies that's running the entire United States Army, or the is getting that much money. This is, I don't think, Braintree's not a large community. I mean, I guess we could Google it, but it's not that big, and I don't even know. And kudos to Jimmy Machado. The police association opposed it because it sets a precedent. And what really disturbs me is, again, we see when they complain and try to take the pensions away from people who worked their whole life and they try to cut their benefits, they blame the fact that the pension system's more expensive. It's costing too much. Well, this is one of the reasons it costs too much. They're going to give this guy a pension, and he's not even close to retirement age, so he's going to be getting a pension. He's going to be on the books with a $116,000 pension, for maybe 30 years. And he's saying it doesn't set a precedent because it was specifically tailored for him as an individual, which only shows, again, politics. They took one individual and passed a law that allowed this guy to make over $250,000 a year. I don't know who his cousin is, but I'd like to get to know him, because this guy, but it does. People are going to try to do this everywhere for somebody that's connected. And well, it's not going to happen because you have to draft a home rule petition. Well, guess what? I don't know. I don't think there's ever been, there may be one, because you should never say never, but I'd say 99.9% of the home rule petitions that have ever hit Boston go through, because it's simple. The legislators, the other legislators, because they want to say to the legislator, hey, look, if I'm going to take care of somebody in my community, you make sure you vote for it, and I'll vote for your home rule petition if you vote for mine. So it goes up there, and their excuse is, well, I don't oppose this. If the city of Fall River or the town of Braintree wants to do this, that's their prerogative. And again, screw the taxpayers. I mean, Braintree, the people of Braintree, And now the people of the entire state, because the pension, the pension board now has to assume this liability. This is just absolutely reprehensible. They're so blatant. It's like the pay raises and the stipends for them. They try to just erase it by making these ridiculous statements. So they're going to hire a guy because specifically he tries to recover from an evidence room scandal. So that makes a lot of sense. Apparently he was the chief and there was a scandal in the evidence room. So instead of firing him for not running the department properly, you give him a $116,000 pension and then pay him full-time pay to stay on. The absolutely, Murphy's Law, and the Peter principle. You can't make up this stuff. It's insane. And, so the next politically connected police chief or fire chief who somebody really likes or gives enough to the governor, and the governor signed it. And we had a conversation about this yesterday, CJ. I don't know. Baker, and if you read this article, which I encourage you to do, it's in the Boston Herald. The irony of this is that, the governor signed this bill, and the mayor of Braintree was put on a blue ribbon panel committee tasked with identifying the problems in the MBTA's retirement system. Look, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. This mayor is on a panel to cut people's benefits in the MBTA because they're having pension issues, and he turns around and sponsors a bill to circumvent the law for one of his cronies. God, it's just nuts. It's just nuts. What do you say to this? People of Massachusetts, people of Braintree, please, vote all of these imbeciles out. They have no regard for you or your wallet.
Not like they ever did anyhow.
This kills me. It's like, this kills me. It's just, like I said, when they talked about a blue ribbon panel, Baker's support for the bill comes from the Swampscott Republican, has made pension reform a priority elsewhere, like the MBTA. Now our governor has made pension reform a priority, and now he signs a bill that allows somebody to rape and pillage the pension system. Okay, now Baker had previously tapped Braintree Mayor Joe Sullivan, who filed a bill, to serve on a blue ribbon panel tasked in 2015 with identifying issues at the T, which singled out the agency's pension woes as needing further investigation. Well, hey, MBTA guys, don't worry about it. After he gets through, you might get a $100,000 pay raise in your pension. This is just, it boggles your mind when you read things like this. You almost think it's fake news. But you know something? If it's a political hack or a politician picking your pocket, it's definitely not fake news.
This is true. This is true. Well, while we're on public safety,
another nerve ending for me.
Yeah. Another scare tactic by the city of Fall River and the fire department union.
Yeah.
Okay? They're saying that the administration has made cuts to the fiscal 2018 budget after the city council voted to take out $1.9 million in expenditures. Many of the cuts reflect suggestions made by the city council, who only have the authority to reduce funding within an appropriation line group. The finance team is also restricted to make cuts within the identified line group. Representatives of the administration met with the Herald News editorial board on Wednesday to discuss the changes from their proposed $280 million budget. Director of Financial Services Mary Miss Pinocchio Sahadi said the police and fire departments took the hardest hits in part due to suggested cuts to the MIS budget. MIS budget? How is that affecting public safety? But let's go on.
Yeah, well,
The other Pinocchio in the thing says it was a decision of the financial team to consolidate some of the public safety services in MIS, like police forensics and cruiser computers, and creating a safer email system for the fire department and increasing data storage. Consequently, there was a significant increase in their budget, and part of it was due to centralization, and part of it was due to new services. The council suggested large cuts in MIS with a decrease of $357,000 in their expense budget that will be absorbed by police and fire at $80 and $193 respectively. How could it be? How come it couldn't have been absorbed by the city side?
well,
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe one of the mayor's friends would affect this, thing. So now they're forced to charge back those expenses to the departments.
well, CJ, congratulations, Mayor Carrere. You've done it again. Every single time there's a penny taken away from the budget, nobody looks to the $30,000 pay raise you gave to someone that's in the fire budget. Nobody looks at the gigantic, pay raises you gave to people. You gave somebody in the auditor's office $6,000 last year and $6,000 this year. $12,000 worth of pay raises in 2 years. It's always public safety. People don't listen. Don't listen. And if they try it, rise up, because you know something? This is a scare tactic. Why is it always public safety that's cut? I had to go through it for all my time on a department. There was always cut fire, cut police, and cut this, because you're going to have, rampant crime on the streets. Oh, wait a minute, we have that anyway, regardless of how much we spend, okay?
Right.
And you're going to burn to death in a fire. Well, guess what? Like the pension system that we just talked about, that is destroyed by government, not the people who worked all their life and earned a pension, by political hacks getting giant pensions because they're politically connected, and cities and states skimming from the pension fund. That's how the pension system went south. Not because the people who pay in every paycheck into the system and work for 35 years or 30 years or 40 years and pay into the system. That's not what hurts the system. It's guys like this. 116 grand. I'm surprised they didn't give it to him in his second year on a job. He probably, with this, he's probably saying, God, if I knew I was this politically connected, I would have done this when I was 21. I would have been working for the last 40 years with getting a full pension and my salary. And again, this is another issue. You talk about overtime. Let me tell you about overtime. Let me give you a little history of the overtime. The city created the overtime problem. The city. At one time, we had a 300-man fire department. The city made a decision to drop it down to 255, a decision which I opposed as the president of the union. The rationale behind that was it was cheaper to pay people overtime than hire those 45 firefighters and pay their benefits and health care and everything else. And they did the numbers, which was absolutely correct in that little window, in that snapshot in time. They were 100% correct. However, the problem is that the overtime budget was then level funded. And what happens? If you're negotiating pay raises, if you've created, if people are being paid more, ultimately that's no longer a savings. And what ultimately happens is the only way you can do this is if you give somebody a 5% raise, you have to increase the overtime budget proportionally to fund overtime at the new pay rates. Well, that's not what happened. So many moons ago, when we had 255, and we kept that for a very, very long time, we began to have overtime problems, which was what exactly I predicted, because the city would not do anything but level fund budgets for years in everything except pay, negotiated pay increases. So what happens? When a firefighter was making, let's make a little round figures, $10 an hour, and he paid overtime, so he made $15 an hour. So you set your overtime budget based on the expenditures and the projection. 5 years later, they're making $20 an hour. So overtime's now costing you $30 an hour. Do the math. Instead of costing you 15, it's costing you 30, twice as much. So guess what? When you level fund the overtime budget, you run out of money because it's only 50% funded. But they don't tell you that. It's always, we got to lay people off. We need more money. Well, you failed in your duty when you negotiated these things and made these decisions to take that into consideration. But you don't care because you have no fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer. Or as the mayor so eloquently put it, there's no cap on how much we can spend. So be happy Mike Aguirre only stayed at the Ritz. This is the attitude that you should be irate over as a taxpayer. Are they going to run out of money? I don't know. But why they're running out of money, I can tell you. And I'll challenge anybody to sit down with me and look at the pay raises versus the budget funding on overtime from when this began, when we went from 300 to 255, and tell me, look at now. Fire and police rolled in all their stipends and benefits into their base salary when the pension laws changed. And, you know, they were right. They were, you know, these benefits were pensionable. There was wording that said this would be computed as part of your pension. So when they changed the law and said, you know, they narrowed the definition, they rolled it in so they would maintain that benefit, which is 100% correct. However, it elevated their pays again in addition to any pay raises negotiated. And did they make an adjustment to the overtime budget when that happened? Absolutely not. So again, Mary Sahadi and Kathy Ann Viveris, all they deal with is, we're out of money. And why you're out of money? Because you don't do your job. That's why we're out of money. You don't, you know, when you go to a collective bargaining table, a union has to do a cost analysis and an ability to pay analysis on the community. Because when you go to arbitration, you have to prove their ability to pay the demands that you're making in the contract. The city doesn't have to do that. The city just gives, as Governor Baker did, they give their friends anything they want. And they never worry about whether they can pay for it or not, because they can raise the stormwater fees, how much it costs for a permit, and your property taxes to the max, and then come back and ask you for an override.
Like Berkeley.
Like Berkeley, which went down. So, you know, CJ, you really baited me today. You had two issues that you know are near and dear to my heart. This stuff and this. And look, you can't blame. You can't blame the unions.
No.
It's their job to go in and negotiate pay raises. But when the city does that, they have to understand that they have an obligation to fund that contract and also fund all elements of that contract. So the overtime budget that was left neglected through all this time, it's not their fault, it's the city's fault.
No, it's not. It's the chief's fault.
Well,
because the chief never funded it. The chief didn't put in his budget, because remember, each department head sets their budget. So the chief didn't present it to the city that he needed that. Not only this chief, but previous chiefs. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for saying this, because Even the chief said zero-based budget gives him no room to wiggle. Well, guess what? You created it. You put it out there. So if you are getting you're getting squeezed, that's your fault, Chief Lynch.
Well, I don't.
Just like it's Acting Chief Duperre's fault. These are the budgets you presented.
Well, I gotta disagree with that one, because I know for a fact that that when I was on, there were budgets that were presented with an accurate number to fund it, and they were ordered by the mayor to cut it. It's too much. They level funded it. And look, I know what you're going to say. Before you do it, let me tell you this. And I agree, because whenever there was a problem, I was in front of the council screaming.
Right.
And I have a problem with when that happens, which is why I fought to keep the chief's job in civil service, so they're not worried about getting a contract renewal or getting the job. Because once they got it, they've got it. But they should have enough commitment to their department and enough courage to get before the council and do what a name that most people who watch our show, well, some of them, we have a lot of people in the high-rises high out there that are watching our show. Well, remember Frank Manning. You remember Frank Manning from DPW? I remember him going before the council on numerous occasions and say, if you don't give me this amount, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to run out of money, and you're either going to have to find more money to give me, or we're going to shut the place down.
That's it.
And so did the superintendent of schools do that.
Right.
On occasions. And this is the key. The key is, look, it disturbs me when they're trying to just get more money. Let's stand up and say, look, and chiefs were restrained. I mean, they get the order from the sixth floor. This budget will be zero-based, or this budget will be, you can only increase your budget. Well, if people have negotiated 10% worth of pay raises,
and he's giving you a 2% increase,
and he's telling you can only increase your budget by 2%, and even then he's fighting with you over the overtime budget. Well, okay, but at least stand up and say, look, and what's happened is over the years they've caved to political pressure, and rather than stand up like Leo Stapleton, don't say it for you guys out there that are watching it and saying it's never been done, nobody will do that. Yes, they did. In the city of Boston, Leo Stapleton, who was the head of the Boston Fire Department, when they made a drastic manpower cut to the Boston Fire Department, he called a press conference and announced to the community in Boston that until I get my men back, I cannot fight an offensive fire attack. So wherever a fire starts, you can fundamentally cross it off the tax rolls, because I don't have the personnel to fight an offensive fire attack. It's going to have to be a defensive fire attack because of the manning cuts that the mayor has required me to make. And guess what? He got the men back. He got kudos from everybody, including the unions, and then his son replaced him as the head of the fire commissioner of Boston. And what happened? After a while, mayors in Boston got tired of having fire commissioners who would stand up for the men and for the people and for the safety of the people, and they eliminated the fire commissioner's requirement that they had to be a chief officer for 20 years in order to be the fire commissioner in Boston. And they made it, they could appoint anybody they wanted, and they appointed a retired naval officer who had absolutely no fire experience as the fire commissioner in Boston. So now when you see the police commissioner and a fire commissioner in Boston, you can guarantee that they are pleading the party line. Whatever the mayor says, that's what's going to happen. And they're not going to tell you why it happened. The reality is that the overtime budgets in every department, but especially fire, they didn't keep up, and that is on the people who do the budget. Like I said, if you give people a 5% pay raise and you don't increase the overtime budget, obviously you're going to deplete the overtime budget quicker. And if it's the same as it was last year and you have the same amount of overtime, guess what? We're going to run out of money. So rather than say this is the problem and fix it, they go back and threaten cuts to scare everybody, just like they do in a retirement system. They're going to take it out of you. They're going to pick the pocket of the retirement system, and then they're going to go back and blame the retirement system, not themselves, for the retirement system being in trouble. So the same thing here. We've got a problem. I'm not discounting that. But that problem is a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah. But you know, the thing is that the chief is going to take the money out of maintenance of the older trucks. Granted, we're getting new trucks, as he said. Okay, but we still got to keep that line of older trucks, that fleet of older trucks as a second line of defense. Yeah. So we're going to take the money out of there. It's just terrible.
Yeah, but why? Can you explain something to me? And they've been doing this for years all over the state and all over the country. We know that. Fire and police is always the threat that every administration uses, and people forget. Why, for once, can't we have a mayor who says cuts in public safety will be the last resort, not the first option?
Because a threat in public safety scares the public.
And guess what? That's right. But guess what? Then you'd have to take your $12,000 worth of pay raises to the assistant auditor out. Then you'd have to take the $30,000 pay raise you gave to EMS guy, and all the other pay raises that you've proposed, and all the other pay raises you did. And by the way, I got to get this one in quickly. You're going to break the news. Christian Gupta, the auditor, is going to be terminating his employment and going to another city because he can't take the Gestapo-esque tactics that they're using on him to force him out. And my prediction, like Karnak the Magnificent, you know, Johnny Carson, my prediction is that the assistant auditor, whose resume we're going to have to look at, who just got $12,000 worth of pay raises in the last 2 years, will be the new auditor. And
I'll guarantee she gets another pay raise.
And gets another pay raise. So you heard it here first.
And from what I understand, Gupta has been blocked. He's been kept out of all the meetings that he's supposed to be involved in, and the assistant auditor is the one that's being brought in. So, you know, this is called a hostile work environment. And it's not only Mr. Gupta. There are other people within city government that are fearful that they're going to lose their jobs if they don't hop to it as soon as they're told to. Once they're told jump, they know they got to jump twice as high. And this is a hostile work environment. And honestly, Mr. Gupta, once you leave, I think you should file a lawsuit against the city for a hostile work environment. Any employee who's been fired should be hiring attorneys for a hostile work environment. This is a retaliatory practice, not only throughout the city, but also now within our own government, within City Hall. We have to stop this. People should not be afraid to go to work.
Yeah, and be harassed. And we have been told, and obviously it's an allegation, we have been told that he was constantly harassed by people, including the chief financial officer of this community, who went in there and demanded that he accounted for every little second, and why weren't you in the office? And he was supposed to be at lunch, and he was at lunch, and he said, look, when I go, I tell the people I'm going to the men's room, I'm going up to a meeting with Kathy. But they wanted him to count for every single minute, and the reality is that it's harassment. And here's the department head that's harassed. I wonder if the assistant auditor who got all the pay raises has to account for every minute. But then again, they know where she is. She's always with them. So, but you know, again, we see a pattern here of harassment. So, you know, take heart to this, and remember, maybe you too can get $270 grand a year.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday. Stay angry.
Stay angry. Real angry.